Hello, I'm Graham and I hope everyone's having a great day. Welcome to today's video. Now in today's video I want to look at shooting close-ups with the Canon EOS M series of cameras. Now I tried to do some research onto which is the best of the options to use to get close-up pictures with the EOS M series, but I couldn't find anything on the web which would indicate the best way to go. So I thought the best thing to do is to work it out for myself. And I'm going to share that information with you in today's video. So I've designed a rig here that allows me to look at the magnification of the lenses with various attachments and with using extension tubes. So we're going to be using things like supplementary lenses, which will go onto the front element of your lens, and then we're going to be looking at extension tubes which move the lens away from the sensor. As you move the lens away from the sensor, it allows you to focus closer. So we're going to look at the optical quality and the amount of magnification you get in each case. So I set up a sliding rig here which allows me to move the camera backwards and forwards on the rig and be able to determine the closest focus that the camera can get when we've got either the native lens or a supplement. So at the moment I'm using the Canon EOS 18 to 250 lens, as that gives me greatest amount of magnification, and working at 250mm allows me to throw the background out of focus if I'm shooting things like flowers or insects on plants. So the closest focus distance I can get with the camera set to the 150mm position, if I try to move this further in, it won't focus. Just move it back a couple of millimeters and there it will focus. Now I'm going to measure from the focal plane of the sensor to the subject, not from the front of the lens to the subject. The focal plane is actually marked on the Canon series of cameras, so I'm going to measure from there to the actual target, and in this case that's 0.567 meters, so I'm going to make a note of that. So that's at 150mm, and that's the closest focus I can get. Now you can see on the scale, that's, if I look at the scale to the left, that's 7.4mm, and if I look to the scale on the right, that's 13.6. So if I subtract the two, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, almost 8 centimeters of subject width there. You can see I'm shooting at the 16:9 aspect ratio. If I went to 3:2, if I can just move across, that still gives me 6,000 pixels wide image, but if I shoot 16:9, you can see that I still get the 6,000 pixel wide image. So we're using the same magnification if we were going to do 16:9 or 3:2, so we're going to use 16:9 in this video. I've got it set up in aperture priority mode, and at the moment you can see we've got a 60th of a second at f8 with ISO 640. So it's indicating that we can't focus, so I'm just going to back up slightly. At that point, that is the closest focus we can get with this lens set to autofocus. We'll just double check that distance from the sensor plane to the subject. 0.560, so that's the distance without any supplementary lens. So what I'm going to do now is attach this Polaroid 250D lens to the front element of the lens itself. Now this 250D is one I use with the FZ330, so that has a 52mm filter thread. The 18 to 150 has got a 55, so I've used the 52 to 55 step-up ring to allow me to use it on this particular lens. So screwing that in place, immediately see that the camera is out of focus, which means I've got to bring the camera nearer to the actual target. So as I'm moving this forward, at some point we should see it start to come into focus, and they can see that it's coming into focus about there. So if I just recheck that with the autofocus of the camera, yeah, it can autofocus there. I'm going to go in a little bit further. No, it can't focus at that point, so I'm just going to back up until I get the image to autofocus at that point. You can see already on the screen there is an element of distortion on the outside edge of the image. That's due to the fact that we're using these supplementary lenses, so take note of that as to the amount of distortion versus what we will get when we use the extension tubes. So if you look at the image magnification there, we've got roughly 3.4 millimeters wide. So I'm going to measure the distance again now from the sensor to the subject. That's 0.412 meters. And my subject width is 3.4 centimeters wide. I'll just set up the self-timer mode. So I'm going to use the super control panel to get into that. Cursor along for the 2-second timer. And now we're going to take this picture at f8, which gives me a good amount of depth of field, and hopefully that will improve the outside sharpness. Brought it in a little bit, but not spectacularly. Okay, we'll now change over to a more popular lens, which are the Raynox series of lenses. Now the Raynox have their own mounting clip, so if I unscrew the Polaroid from the front element of the lens, and the usual ones to use with the Raynox series are the 150 and the 250. Now the 250 is quite a powerful lens, and it does mean that you're getting very, very shallow depth of field. So I'm going to install first of all the 150. So the clip of the system just clips into the filter thread of the lens. Now again, I need to move the camera nearer to get the image to focus, which is about there. Just check we can get the autofocus. Yeah, just try to move in a little bit closer. It won't focus there, so we're going to go back to the focus point there. So you can see immediately we're getting much better image quality. There is no distortion to the outside edges as we saw with the Polaroid achromat lens. So the magnification with the Raynox lens is about 3 centimeters, and the focus distance from the camera to the target at this magnification is 0.393 centimeters. So we'll take that picture and we can have a look at that in the video, just to have a look at the quality with the lens stopped down to f8. That looks very nice. I'll now change the 150 over to the 250. So remembering that magnification there is roughly 3 centimeters wide. If I unscrew the 150 lens and insert the 250 lens, again it's a much stronger magnification, so we need to move the camera closer to the subject. So I'll move it in, and that's going to be the focus point. So we'll just check that we can get autofocus, move it half a centimeter forward, can't focus, just bring it back to the focus point, check we get autofocus. Yeah, so you can immediately now see we've got about 2 centimeters worth of image, so the magnification is a lot more. If I measure from the camera focal plane to the subject, that's 0.36 centimeters. Now you can see out in the field that the subject to lens distance becomes quite short, and in fact if I just measure that for you now, that's just about 6 centimeters. So we're talking about 3 inches away from the subject to the front of the lens. So if it's something that's easily disturbed, then this system isn't going to work for you. You need to use a longer focal length and some other way of increasing the magnification, and the only way to do that is by using extension tubes. Now I'm going to remove the lens from the camera and install one of these extension tubes. Now they normally come in sets of 3. This particular set is a Movo extension tube, again on Amazon. The tubes are 10mm, 21mm and 16mm, so the set of 3 you can use them singly or you can combine them into whatever length you want. I'm going to turn off the camera, remove the lens, remove the Raynox lens, and I'll install the first of the close-up rings. Use the white dot on the tube to the white dot on the lens, and then install the combination onto the camera again. Reset the camera back to the 150mm focal length, and I should then, so now I can move the camera back, get the camera to autofocus to the closest point, so it won't autofocus that point. I'm just going to go back 1/2 centimetre, will focus, come forward 1/2 centimetre, will focus, come forward, will focus, come forward a little bit more, won't focus that distance, so just going back a couple of millimetres, and that is the closest focus I can get with the lens set back to the 150mm focal length position. And you can see that the image magnification is again 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.1 centimeters wide with the 10mm extension tube. Now there's no loss of resolution when you use an extension tube, there's just the loss of light because you're extending the lens away from the sensor plane. But as you're using TTL metering, the camera will accommodate that for you. So I'm just going to take that shot. We'll again set up the 2-second timer in the super control panel. And again, that's with the camera set to the aperture of f8. Just measure that distance from the sensor to the target. .54 centimeters. Sorry, 0.54 meters. I'll now put the middle size ring, which is the 16mm ring, onto the camera. Reset the focal length to 150mm, and again now I can start to slide in the camera until it comes into focus. Moving the camera closer until it won't focus anymore. At that point it won't focus. I'm just going to back it up slightly, and at that point it does focus. Camera to subject distance is 0.51 meters. And again, we'll take that picture so we can have a look at that in the video. I'll now remove the 16 and go for the 21. Again, check they're at the 150 distance. We should be able to go closer. Getting to not focus there, so we're focusing at that distance. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4.8 centimeter wide image with the 21 tube. So with the combination of the 10, 16 and 21mm extension tubes on the Canon lens, with it still set to 150mm focal position, I've set the camera to manual focus, so I can actually focus the camera manually to get me the sharpest image. And again, if I go slightly further forward I can't focus. I just need to back the camera up a little bit, and that would be the focus point. So if we take that picture, you can see the actual magnification is about 1 to 3 centimeters. So it's given me the same magnification as the Raynox 150, and let's just measure that distance. About 0.40, so it's around about the same distance from the sensor plane to the subject as using the 150 lens. If you notice, my exposure here is now 1/50th of a second at f8, and we'll compare that to the exposure with the Raynox lens. So just recapping on that, with the Raynox 150 lens attached at the 150mm position, given the same magnification, the exposure is 1/80th of a second, where it was 1/50th of a second with the extension tube. So we're losing about a half a stop of light by using the extension tubes on the subject. So in some cases that won't be an issue, but I think you can see from the image itself, even using that supplementary lens, there's still a little bit of edge distortion. The amount of depth of field at this is absolutely nothing. From the front face of the rule here to the background is about 6mm at the very most, and you can see that at f8 I can only get in sharp the rule and the background is out of focus. If I stop the camera down to f11, so if I just bring up the exposure there and I change the aperture to f11, that's about the smallest you want to go with the crop frame sensor, otherwise you start to get into diffraction and the image becomes soft. So we'll just take that picture at f11, and you see the background has just come in slightly, so we'll go a little bit further and we'll go to f16. Again, we'll take that shot, and the background is coming sharp, but it isn't critically sharp. So you can see the amount of depth of field you've got when you're using this high magnification is only about 3 or 4mm at the very most. So all your subject has to be in the same plane. If you're shooting a flower, then obviously you can highlight just say a stamen. If it's an insect, you could just highlight its eyes, but you wouldn't get enough depth of field for the whole body. So then you'd have to use some sort of focus stacking techniques if you wanted to use the whole of that image. So to give you an idea of the amount of depth of field you've got, I've set up this little Lego character on the rig. If you can see, if I manually focus, if I get his eyes in focus, the tip of his nose is just slightly out. So that's with the lens at its widest aperture, so that's going to be f5.6. So if I've got the lens set to f16, we should be able to get a little bit more depth of field when we take that picture. You can see there's a little bit more from the tip of his hat to the back of his head. So you've got about a centimetre at the very most of depth of field when you're shooting with f16, but you're running into that area where diffraction will start to soften the image. If I remove the Raynox and we go back to the native lens at 150 and I back it up to the distance where it will focus, which is there, you can see the amount of focus we've got now is quite different. So if I back the camera up to that closest focus distance with the 150 lens, again if I take that picture at f16, we should see an increase in depth of field, and almost the monitor behind it is sharp. We'll take the picture at what I would recommend, round about f8, f11, so we'll go for an intermediate f10. We'll just check refocus at that point. We'll make sure that his eyes are sharp at that point, and we will take that picture, and you can see we've got sufficient depth of field. Now, one of the solutions to giving you better light on the subject is to use one of these LED ring lights. Now I don't advise using these in the ring flash mode that these are sold for, because the exposure time is only at 1/250th of a second, so that's not fast enough to arrest any motion, either if you're using this handheld or any subject motion, because of the high magnification. But they are useful for giving you sufficient light at this close distance to give you some fairly short exposure times. This one is the MCO Plus MRF 18, and you can see it's got 18 LEDs on the front of it. You can vary the intensity of the light from full power down to 1/28th. So it gives you some control over the amount of light. So these clip onto a adapter ring which screws into your lens. So if I just put this onto the lens here, we can see, if I just start the capture program running again. If I just start the capture program running again, you can see the light that I've got. Now I've got the lens set again at f10 still. You can see the exposure is 1/640th of a second, so that is sufficient for a handheld exposure to give you a fairly decent exposure. And because we're using that intense light source at the subject, anything behind goes, because of the inverse square law, will go towards black. So you can see we can get some nice isolated subjects by using that high intensity light. With the light level set to 1/128th, you can see that the background isn't quite as dark. We're getting a little bit of ambient light, which is adding to the exposure. So that's a 1/25th of a second. Ideally, when I'm using the macro mode, I would use flash, and I've got a dedicated ring flash for the Canon series of cameras, so that gives me a lot more control. I can vary the intensity of the flash tube. I can have one tube on, one tube off, or one tube on and a third power or half quarter power on the other one, so I can control the shadowing effects from the light. So there we are. That is some methods of increasing the magnification of your lenses by using supplementary lens, or preferably the extension tubes, because you're not then adding extra air to glass surfaces, which will always degrade the image. So by using extension tubes, you don't get that problem, just a slight amount of loss of light because you're moving that lens further away from the sensor. Well, that's it for the video. Thanks very much for watching. If you're a new viewer and you like what you see, please do click the subscribe button and also the bell notification icon, and you'll get notification when I upload any new videos to my channel. Also check out my photographic blog, and I'm going to put a link to that in the video description below. You'll find lots more information on the EOS M system camera and also on photography in general. Also, there's an application to join the 3 weekly newsletter group on the home page of the blog. Complete that application form, which gives me the authority to email you, and then you can get the 3 weekly newsletter, which is a technical journal in its own right. So until the next video, thanks again for watching. Please do take care, and I hope to see you all in the next one. Goodbye for now.